What are we to say about all the evil in the world? This is the third installment of what I had hoped to be a 6 or 7-part discussion of evil. Today we will deal with the problem of natural evil, with a focus on free will. Those of you who have graciously watched the first 2 videos in 2022 realize there has been an extended period since the second video. I apologize for that. Our whole family has faced some significant challenges of our own over the past 2 years, both personally and professionally, really going back 4 or 5 years. Admittedly, it has been a challenge to my faith. But this has also created burdens with respect to time and energy, mentally, physically, and emotionally to devote to these videos. Aside from that, for some reason over the past 2 years, I've been losing my voice. I made a few trips to the ENT doctors, but they haven't solved the issue. And I have not had the time or resources to pursue more medical solutions to this, assuming there are any. I'm still determining what the future will bring regarding my ability to offer more videos. Still, I want to share this one, which I made over a year ago, but became consumed by the aforementioned pressing issues. Allow me to offer a few thoughts before this third installment. First, I would have changed a few ideas if I were to redo this video, for which I don't have time and wish to move on to the next very soon, if that's possible. I still think several of these perspectives offered here are valuable and significant in this. I will raise the matter of divine interaction with the world and free will. Even though I don't believe that this is a complete answer, it is essential to any discussion. I also briefly address the question of divine suffering. But this is not the whole story. In a future video, I hope to incorporate theological perspectives on divine impassibility, raising the question, does God suffer? Can God suffer? Second, I want to emphasize again that when I refer to biblical text, as I will in this video, I'm not expecting you to presume the truth of Christianity or the New Testament record concerning Jesus or the Bible as a whole. That topic touches on this issue, but is really for another day. Instead, in these videos, I seek to denote what some biblical texts have to say concerning the issue of evil and suffering, given the fact that skeptics employ the problem of evil to discount belief in God or belief in a creator God of love and omniscience and omnipotence as the Christian faith proclaims. So it is important to hear what these seminal Christian texts say, holding at bay for the moment the questions of their historical veracity or inspiration. And many honestly wrestle with maintaining their faith in such a God, given the challenges they see with evil and gratuitous suffering that exists in the world, both on a personal and intellectual level. Quite frankly, I do as well. Third, I'm not proclaiming hard and fast solutions. These are more explorations of my own wrestling with the problem of evil and interacting with various proposed issues and solutions. But I hope to provide a summary video of my thoughts on this vital issue at the end of the series. Whether that will satisfy you, the viewer, will be for you to decide. In our first video, we introduced the problem of evil, which calls into question the existence of an omnipotent, all-powerful, and omnibenevolent, all-good or all-loving God. We briefly highlighted 3 areas of importance: compassion for those who are suffering or have suffered horrendous evils. Second, reasoning carefully, as opposed to leaping to the first emotional or heuristic response, regardless of which side of the controversy one falls. And third, hope, which we have yet to dive into in any depth. For in fact, if there is a future hope for creation beyond death, that entails we can't judge the story of the world in totality at this point. And we introduced several scholars in philosophy, theology, biblical scholarship, and science that may be worth your time to consider. If you get a chance, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And I've also linked a site for my nonprofit, Shalom for the City, for you to check out. Thanks again for watching. Here's the third installment. Today we will discuss the relationship of free will to the problem of natural evil. In our last discussion, we focused on how the gift of human free will opens the door to moral evil. Free will on its own falls short as a full explanation for the evil that humans endure, yet it still serves as a vital element in any discussion. There remains the problem, however, of natural evil. Bart Ehrman argues against the free will defense of moral evil in part by turning to natural evil. Ehrman writes in his book, "When I respond by suggesting that free will can't solve all the problems of suffering, hurricanes in New Orleans, tsunamis in Indonesia, earthquakes in Pakistan, and so on, my discussion partner gets a kind of confused look and is either silent or decides to change the subject." Three factors to consider initially before we begin to discuss free will as it relates to natural evil. First, as I intimated, no thoughtful student really believes that the free will defense is in any way a full answer or solution to the problem of evil. If they do, they have more work to do. Nevertheless, it is at least part of the answer. Second, humans are part of nature. We are animals, so natural evil and human evil coalesce to some degree. Third, what Ehrman fails to recognize is that nature itself has a free will, just as humans do. This is true both scientifically and is supported, I believe, in the biblical record. By his argument, Ehrman effectively takes nature as neutral and mindless. This reduces nature to something smaller and more controllable than it is in actuality, as if a divine creator decided just to program it, and this is what happens. Many Westerners, particularly Christians, think of nature as inanimate and under the control of an alleged God. This is Ehrman's God who is in charge of it. As we noted previously, he's ostensibly arguing against a fictional God of his own creation, a God which, of course, many Christians incorrectly buy into, in my view. Yet that is neither the biblical view of nature or God, nor is it even a scientific view. John Polkinghorne, whose thought we explored in the previous video, was a renowned British physicist who taught at Cambridge University for many years. He was also a believer in God, in the resurrection of Jesus, and in the Bible as inspired by God. He writes, "Tempest and earthquake take their toll on human life. Though the incident of some disease may be due to human action, for example, through the carcinogenic effects of pollution, yet the far greater part is surely the responsibility of the Creator alone. He is also the one who allowed the wastefulness of evolution with its blind alleys and its competition for limited resources." What are we to make of all of that? I think the only possible solution lies in a variation of the free will defense applied to the whole created world. In His great act of creation, I believe that God allows the physical world to be itself, in that independence which is love's gift of freedom to the one beloved. That world is endowed in its fundamental constitution with an anthropic potentiality, which makes it capable of fruitful evolution. By anthropic potentiality, Polkinghorne means that the universe was endowed with a potential to produce human life by a faithful creator. I would say inevitably endowed as part of the purposes of God. The cosmos is given the opportunity to be itself. The opportunity to be itself, a vital concept, and an astounding one. This is certainly in line with the theology of Genesis chapter 1. Clearly, God gives creation freedom. Genesis 1:20, "And God said, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures." 1:24, "And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind." In Genesis 1 and verse 26, "Then God said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle," and so forth. The creation as a whole is endowed with extraordinary, potent, life-giving powers. It is also endowed with a freedom to bring about life. The creation or nature has its own freedom and calling. A central purpose of Genesis chapter 1 is to demythologize nature, to counter the ancient deification of nature by Babylonian, Egyptian, or other surrounding cultures. It is not intended to give any sort of literalistic or certainly not scientific account of the process of creation. Rather, Genesis 1 is framed within an ancient cosmic geography, complete with a dome above the earth, in which the waters sit above the stars, moon, and sun. Its description has no direct bearing on the world as it is scientifically. The ancients didn't see physicality in the various elements like the sun, moon, planets, and stars the way we do, but saw these through a kind of mytho-theological lens. Although demythologized, we must not go so far as to think that this reduces nature to a lifeless, inanimate thing like a rock or something. And if we look carefully at nature from our human or scientific vantage point, we see that there is a freedom and intelligence. Trees cooperate with other tiny, even microscopic creatures in the earth to share nutrients with those and with each other, and trees dwell in a community with other trees, sharing food and even warning other trees of impending attacks. This is an amazing thing. There is a cooperation in nature that puzzles many scientists. As this book, Evolution, Games, and God, explores the principle of cooperation. The Hubble telescope has given us much information from the deep past about ongoing star birth and creation. The Earth, or the universe, is endowed with life-producing capacities and operates freely. Polkinghorne elaborates, a world of potentiality without predictability, endowed with an assurance of development but with a certain openness as to its actual form. It is inevitably a world with ragged edges, where order and disorder interlace each other, and where the exploration of possibility by chance will lead not only to the evolution of systems of increasing complexity, but also to the evolution of systems imperfectly formed and malfunctioning. This is all the nature of genuine freedom. One might say God gave the whole of creation a kind of freedom to be itself. Yet God's purposes for love and fruitfulness and eventual perfection through the incarnate Son of God is still in place. We don't like the idea of chance, but that's what giving freedom to something must embrace. Now, this is not a perfected freedom of the kind Jesus declares, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." But nevertheless, this freedom is the bare minimum of genuine freedom. Nor does freedom and chance in nature imply that it cannot eventually be overcome by love. Polkinghorne quotes W.H. Vanstone from his marvelous and insightful book, Love's Endeavor, Love's Expense. The activity of God in creation must be precarious. It must proceed by no assured program. Its progress, like every progress of love, must be an angular progress in which each step is a precarious step into the unknown. It is from that precariousness that natural evil arises, for the existence of evil must be seen as the expression or consequence of the precariousness of divine creativity. There is a necessary precariousness to genuine creational freedom, to be itself, and even science tells us that this seems to be the way things must be. We won't linger on this, there's much more information one can find elsewhere, but David Bentley Hart writes, "Of course, volcanoes are necessary, but for them, and the tectonic instabilities needed to create them, and the seismic shocks that follow from these instabilities, and the oceans of fire that form from the Earth's mantle, the planet almost certainly could not produce and sustain the atmosphere that incubates and shelters terrestrial life, nor would its soils be so fertile, nor its range of temperatures so equable. God no more expressly wills the growth of a cancer," writes Polkinghorne, "than he expressly wills the act of a murderer, but he allows both to happen. God is not the puppet master of either men or matter. God is not the puppet master that many assume him to be, whether it be Christians or atheists or others who assume that he is a puppet master and in control. Neither, however, has God abandoned humanity. In 1755, the Lisbon earthquake became one of the great tragedies in history. It raised serious philosophical and theological issues. Estimates are that at least 100,000, upwards of 250,000, died from the earthquake and subsequent tsunami, which no one saw coming. That's an enormous amount of people, especially given populations of that day. But again, Polkinghorne, when Austin Farrar considered the Lisbon earthquake, which had caused great devastation and loss of life in 1755, Farrar wrote that the will of God in the event is his will for the elements of the earth's crust, or under it, his will that they should go on being themselves and acting in accordance with their natures. Exactly so, writes Polkinghorne. God accords to the processes of the world that same respect that he accords to the actions of humanity. The open flexibility of the world's processes affords the means by which the universe explores its own potentiality. Humankind exercises its will, and God interacts with his creation. The first, through its limitation and frustration, gives rise to physical evil. The second, through its sinfulness, gives rise to moral evil. The world so marred is not abandoned, for the third is the means by which the Creator can exercise a providential care within the evolving history of his creation. Now, there are some limitations we need to explore regarding these points in future videos. Much more about all of this. The question remains as to whether God is so powerless to act that God is in collusion with evil. Polkinghorne speaks to that end. Faced with the dilemma of either a God who withdraws the gift of freedom or a God who is frustrated by the gift of freedom, former Oxford philosopher John Lucas opts for the latter as the cross on which God has chosen to be impaled. It is a corollary of caring that one should be vulnerable, and a God who cares infinitely will be infinitely vulnerable. Lucas's choice of words remind us of the fundamental Christian insight about God's relation to suffering and evil. He is not a spectator, but a fellow sufferer who has himself absorbed the full force of evil in the lonely figure hanging in the darkness and dereliction of Calvary. The Christian believes that he sees God opening his arms to embrace the bitterness of the strange world he has made. The God revealed in the vulnerability of the incarnation and in the vulnerability of the creation are one. He is the crucified God, whose paradoxical power is perfected in weakness, whose self-chosen symbol is the King reigning from the gallows. In the end, whatever shift may be made intellectually to grapple with the problem of evil, the only satisfactory conclusion to the matter will come if it is indeed true that all shall be well. In Christ, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. The death of God on the cross is God's reconciliation to us and our reconciliation to him, and it is the ironic path to resurrection life, abundant and full and eternal life. I want to close with a brief observation from Marilyn McCord Adams and a couple of summary points. She writes, I suggest that divine love of material creation expresses itself in two stages. In this present age, divine love for material creation is permissive. For the most part, material stuff is allowed to be itself, to exercise its powers without divine interference. The personal is allowed to spring up in the household of the material, but the material ravages it. In the age to come, divine love for material creation will express itself by domesticating the material into the household of the personal, so that persons do not become, by intimate association with it, radically vulnerable to horrors. More to unpack in all of this, to which we will return. But the argument concerning evil and suffering touched upon by our main thinkers today is, first, that free will is a partial source of and cause of evil, both moral and natural, human and the broader creation. Second, that divine love expressed in Jesus has not left us alone, but has entered into this vale of suffering and death in order to rescue us and to bring us into the presence of the healing and redemptive love of God, free from death and healed from suffering, which, whether one believes the New Testament or not, that is the message of the New Testament. In the future, we'll explore further theological elements of a free versus a deterministic universe, and a contrast between open theism's uncontrolling love, as Thomas Ord puts it, and Reformed Calvinism's God is in sovereign control of all that happens. Also, what is the presumed role of the mysterious powers or world forces of darkness, malignant forces of evil that are alluded to in the writings of Paul and the prophets and other places in the Bible? This is an important consideration for any discussion relating to Christianity and evil. We will also delve more deeply into what I believe are manifestations of divine love in Jesus and in providence that give us hope and can help us today. That's it for now. Thanks again for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. May your life be filled with peace and blessings, joy and beauty and fulfillment. Shalom, peace to you all.